The G20, which, by the way, included a sidebar meeting between France's president and India's prime minister. India, which at the time of spiraling superpower tensions is both a member of the Quad, a security grouping that includes Australia, India, Japan, and the US, but also the BRICS, powered by Russia and China. Our guest is completing a 4-year stint as Delhi's man in Paris, outgoing Indian ambassador to France, Jawed Ashraf. Thank you for speaking with us here.
Thank you for having me here. Good evening.
These are changing times, and you're departing in a moment of transition in Washington, and it feels like a moment of uncertainty globally. There was a G20 summit last year in India. A lot has changed since when we just saw wrap up in Rio.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, it is, I think, not just because of the election in the United States that it's a period of change. I think we're witnessing sweeping changes in politics, in geopolitics, economics, technology, shifting equations between countries, weakening of international order for quite a while. Also, I think a changing of economic philosophy in the world, across the world. Those who were the architects, I think, of the international order as we know it, are no longer interested in it. In some cases, they're actually quite opposed to it, as we see now. Now, I think what we saw in G20, though, I'd say is something very positive. I think you must recognize in this time of fractious time, there is a great deal of unity, at least cohesion, in getting a consensus. And I think the Delhi G20 summit was instrumental in saving G20 from collapsing, because we did achieve a consensus when no one expected it.
Consensus on what?
A consensus on actually getting a statement that reflected diverse points of view. And this is important because G20 is perhaps today the only platform globally where leaders of major countries from diverse geographies, from different circumstances, are actually coming together to debate on a whole set of issues and then set directions for the future. And you would recall that last year there was a lot of concern whether because of Ukraine there'd even be a consensus, and that whether politics will derail the original objective of G20, which is to shape the direction of the world towards a more prosperous, inclusive future. And I think G20 achieved that last year in saving the future of G20 and also making it more inclusive. And we had Africa Union join G20, which was quite an anomaly not to have them. Since then, we've seen Indonesia, India, Brazil, and then next South Africa will leave G20, which is a great signal that countries are emerging, emerging democracies.
But a lot is changing. Concomital to that G20 is the COP29 climate talks taking place in Azerbaijan. It's tough going, I'm told, with 48 hours to go. And the question is, the climate sort of overall goals that they agreed upon in the communique in Rio, are those ready to be torn up after January the 20th?
Well, I think we'll have to wait and see where we actually go on this, because, let the new administration come into office and then we'll see how they approach this issue. But then the United States is perhaps not the only arbiter of where we go on the climate goals. There are a larger set of issues we need to be honest about in addressing this, including unfulfilled promises, shifting goalposts, the absence of real collective global effort in recognition or in accordance with the principles of common but differentiated responsibilities. I think if the world is able to come together with or without the United States in addressing the issue in a sincere, fair, equitable, just manner, we will be able to achieve our goals.
Right now, here in France, there's anxiety ahead of the return of Donald Trump. Are you sensing that anxiety? Is that something you're putting in your diplomatic cables back to Delhi? And is it justified, that anxiety?
Well, I can't speak for the whether it's justified or no as far as the France or Europe is concerned. I do, of course, have conversations here, some of which, obviously, what I write back is not something I discuss on France 24. But look, I think
when you write home and tell them what the French view is on all of this, what are you telling them about this, the feeling here about the future, when they look at the future of NATO, when they look at things like what you were discussing earlier, perhaps the end of free trade as we've known it up to now?
Well, I'd say this, that, President Donald Trump, or President-elect Donald Trump, has made it quite clear that it's not going to be business as usual as far as the United States is concerned, and the U.S. engagement with the rest of the world is concerned, U.S. engagement with global institutions, global compacts, and international order as we understand it. That's certainly going to change. It is already changing, but that may perhaps be a disruptive moment, something that accelerates that change. So we'll have to wait and see how all of us, the rest of the world, respond to it, how we calibrate it, how they are going to deal with it. So it's not a one-off situation or a linear way of looking at it. As far as India is concerned, of course, we've had a very strong relationship with the United States during President Trump's first presidency, as we've had with other presidents, from President Clinton, President Bush, President Obama, President Biden. And what we've seen so far suggests that there will be continuity in that relationship. There will, of course, be challenges in a complex, large relationship as we have with the United States. But I think we, too...
Well, because you remember, in 2019, you had in Dallas, I think it was,
Yes.
this Howdy Modi rally where Narendra Modi and Donald Trump were there together.
Yes.
Will that be possible next time around if Donald Trump doubles down on tariffs for imports?
I think these are also going to be subject of bilateral negotiations. I think, first of all, we have to recognize what is the fundamental premise of the relationship. It is a great deal of comfort, strategic convergence. There's an excellent relationship between Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi and President-elect Trump. And so far, we also understand how we can deal with each other. So there are larger, broader, global, geopolitical, economic issues to deal with. Within that, as I said, there will be issues relating bilateral issues. But it's also going to be important for all of us, not just for Europe or for anyone else, but also for us to see how he deals with other countries, how the new U.S. administration deals with global issues, global challenges, and global institutions. And that would obviously include trade, climate change, finance. It would also include how you deal with all these institutions that we are familiar with, which have been at the center of global governance, global security, trade and finance, climate change, etc. So
there's a need for those common rules. And here's the question then. At the same time, there's a sort of, I don't know if it is a Trump effect, but certainly concomitant to what's going on, the change in U.S. politics. On your watch here in France, you've seen the rise of the French far right. You've seen how politics, there's much more anti-immigration talk than before. What's changed here in France in the 4 years that you've been here?
Well, it's a very interesting question. I mean, of course, I'm not going to get into classification of political parties into different vocabularies, but I would say that, yes, I've seen some of the same anxieties being expressed over here. Look, we are at a moment in the evolution of our societies where, due to a vast array of changes that you see, economic, political, social, technological, people are seeing a great deal of uncertainty, dislocation about the future. And uncertainty, maybe perhaps even pessimism. And because of all these changes are affecting people in diverse ways, there's, of course, accelerated by a war in Europe, we have seen people search for answers. There are questions. Somehow the present system, people feel, the political systems, the political institutions, political parties are not able to address their concerns, not able to answer their questions. And therefore, they're looking for alternative politics, alternative ways of dealing with their problems. And it is something which is happening across the world. And you have to recognize that there are some common links in this. The common links is the rise of social media. The common links is the great dislocations that the globalization has produced in some quarters, benefits in the others. People who have lost out don't understand what their future holds for them. So we are witnessing, perhaps, when you're walking through a forest, you don't really see the trees.
Well, let me ask you this final question then. You arrive in Paris, it's COVID lockdown.
Yes.
Is that a distant memory, or is that related to everything you've just said, and it's still very much present in your mind as you get ready to leave?
You know, human beings have a way of putting painful experiences behind them, and somehow in these 4 years it is easy to forget about it when you go around on the streets and when you see the magnificent Olympics that Paris hosted. And I would say that it are the two bookends of my stay over here. But I think the consequences of COVID is still present on a daily basis in everyone's life. The changes it brought about, the disruptions it created, the losses that it generated at psychological, emotional, and even in material terms, continues to have an impact on lives of the people, but also, I would say, therefore, on politics, on economic choices, on the way people look at the way they are organized socially and politically. And this has been exacerbated, of course, here in Europe by the war. But as I said, there are deeper underlying structural shifts that are taking place, geopolitical, economic, technological, which is, in a sense, in dissonance with the way we are organized today to our political thoughts, our economic philosophy, our economic organizations. And it is all coming to a clash where people are looking, therefore, for different kinds of answers. And this is exactly why you see politics in Europe, in the United States, in many other parts of the world are getting disrupted in different ways. We are leaving behind what was familiar to us. We don't know what we are heading into. And therefore, the unfamiliar future, the uncertain transition is creating all kinds of social anxieties.
Jawed Ashraf, we wish you best of luck.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for being with us here on France.
It was a pleasure, and I'd say this, that it was a bit a really educational and enriching experience to have lived in France and Europe at this very pivotal moment of time, besides what we've been able to achieve in our bilateral relations between India and France. Thank you very much.
Come back soon. Many thanks. Stay with us. There's much more to come here on France 24. More news plus a day's business and sports.